Hello?
I know you can't hear. He's just starting.
Yes. Are the microphones on? She thought the mics aren't working, or
The mics are for the audio feed.
so they record.
Do you have a gavel?
No, but
Hello?
no. But I just want to ask.
No, you're gonna have to project.
Yeah. Okay. So
You have to project.
okay. So the microphones are only for recording. You're going to have to listen to us talk, unfortunately. Right. Good evening. Welcome to the Oxford 7th Oxford Zoning Board of Appeals. Yeah, is there any way to turn the mic on, or? Oh, boy. Wow, a gavel. It's impressive. All right, let's try that again. Thank you. Oxford 7th, I'm sorry, October 7th, Oxford Zoning Board of Appeals. We have one meeting tonight. It's a public hearing, 722 Main Street, a comprehensive permit application. The applicant is 722 Main Street LLC. The owner is Main Street Oxford Realty LLC. It's for 144 units, 36 affordable apartment homes in 3 buildings, along with associated parking, access, amenities, and all supporting site features and infrastructure required to support the proposed development. It's general business in R2 zoning districts. We have an action date of April 5th, 2022. Stephen, could you please read the the legal notice?
Town of Oxford Zoning Board of Appeals, public hearing notice. Please take notice that a public hearing will be held on Thursday, October 7th, 2021 at 7 p.m. by the Oxford Zoning Board of Appeals at the Oxford Town Hall, 325 Main Street, Oxford, Mass. To hear the petition of 722 Main Street LLC requesting a comprehensive permit per MGL Chapter 40B to allow for the development of 144 units of rental housing, of which 36 units, 25%, will be affordable. The development will include 3 4-story buildings consisting of 15 one-bedroom units, 114 two-bedroom units, and 15 three-bedroom units, along with parking, access roads, amenities, and all application is also requesting waivers from the Town of Oxford bylaw, from the bylaws and the rules and the regulations of the regulatory town boards and department. The property in question is located at 722 Main Street, North Oxford, Mass, as shown on Assessors Map 06B, parcel C06, in the general business and R2 residential zoning districts. The application, plans, and waiver requests can be viewed in the office of the town clerk or land management department during the normal office hours or in the town's website at www.oxfordmass.us. Anyone desiring to be heard on this matter should appear at the place, date, and time designated or submit written comments to the board before the date of the hearing. See masspublicationnotices.org for legal notice. Board of Appeals, Town of Oxford, Oxford, Massachusetts. To the applicants of the Zoning Board of Appeals, you are hereby advised of the following provisions of the Oxford zoning bylaws. Appeals to the Zoning Board of Appeals must be filed within 20 days from the date or order of decision which is being appealed, specifying the grounds thereof. Variances. In order to grant a variance from the requirements of this bylaw, the Zoning Board of Appeals must find that all of the following conditions have been met. A, there are unique circumstances relating to the soil conditions, shape, or topography of such land or structures. B, especially affect such land or structures but do not generally affect the zoning district in which it is located. C, literal enforcement of the provisions of this bylaw would involve substantial hardship, financial or otherwise, but not of personal nature, to the petitioner or the appellant. and that D, desirable relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without nullifying or substantially derogating from the purposes of this bylaw. Special permits. Special permits may be issued only for uses which are in harmony with the general purpose and intent of this bylaw and shall be subject to general or specific provisions set forth herein. In addition, conditions, safeguards, and limitations on time and use may be imposed by the board when issuing a special permit. In granting the special permit, the board shall determine if the following conditions have been met. A, the site is an appropriate location for the use of structure. B, the soils are suitable for on-site sewage disposal. C, an adequate water supply can be provided. D, the use as developed will not adversely affect the neighborhood. And E, there will be no nuisance or serious hazardous to vehicles or pedestrians. In accordance with Chapter 40A, Section 15 of the Mass General Laws, you are hereby advised that any person aggrieved by the decision of the board relative to this matter must file an appeal as provided for in Section 17 of said Chapter 40A within 20 days after the date of the filing of this decision in the office of the town clerk.
Thank you, Stephen.
You're welcome.
All right, we received some additional correspondence tonight as board members. I'd like to ask town manager or town council if they could review what we've received on the GLAM calculation.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Tony Sousa,
Yes.
Town Planner. And also, if I may, I'd like to provide some context as well
Yes,
with
please.
respect to the process for the benefit of the board and everyone here in this room tonight. Before you is a comprehensive permit under Chapter 40B, known as Chapter 40B, or the Comprehensive Permit Law. It's a state law that was enacted many, many years ago, 1969, to facilitate construction of low, moderate income housing. And it establishes a consolidated local review and approval process that empowers this board, the ZBA, the Zoning Board of Appeals, to hold hearings and make binding decisions with respect to the application before you. This is outside of the ordinary, if you will, with respect to other types of applications that would typically be a special permit or a traditional variance. But 40B is very specific. And there are some important elements within the 40B statute that I'd also like to go over, in particular as it relates to safe harbor. And as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, the GLAM calculation or the GLAM percentage, which I'd like to talk about a little further too. But also before getting into that too, I think it's important to just go over the timeline as well that the CBA is proceeding with. So as stated in the notice as read, once the comprehensive permit application is filed with the ZBA, a hearing must be open within 30 days or there is a risk of constructive approval. And the public hearing must close within 180 days unless there is an extension agreed by the applicant or, again, risk of constructive approval. And within 40 days of close of the public hearing, the ZBA must vote and file a decision with the town clerk. With respect to safe harbor, it's a safeguard, as I like to say, but within 15 days of opening of the public hearing, this board must assert, if it intends on asserting, the town's consistent with local needs / safe harbor status. And failure to do so, and this is unique, so failure to do so will result in the board's waiver of that status. And even if the town is consistent with local needs. And a question that I often get too is that the board needs to assert safe harbor status each and every time an application is filed or the assertion is deemed waived. So let's talk a little bit about the three most common safe harbor elements. So a municipality is consistent with local needs if it meets certain thresholds relating to housing units and housing production. Three most common: 10% of the city or town housing units are affordable. Another common question I get is, what is affordable? There is a list furnished by the state, the subsidized housing inventory, and which we do have online, and we have hard copies as well, and you have before you also. That list is very, very important. We are mandated by the state to have 10% of all units affordable. And affordable is based upon state or federal programs that would deem those projects to fall under the SHI inventory. Okay, so where are we? We're at 7.3% today. That includes the Housing Authority properties and Orchard Hill. There is another element with respect to Safe Harbor. A second common option is a housing production plan. This is nothing new. The housing production plan is a document that the state encourages actually communities to apply for and to partake in an effort to understand what the community's goals are, objectives are, and it is an important tool and a great tool to help strategize to get, although incrementally, to get to that quote-unquote 10%, the mandate. Now, going back to the Oxford Master Plan, may sound familiar, the HPP, sorry to call it short, but the Housing Production Plan, was identified as an action item in the master plan. Working with the town manager and staff and over the last year, we've been, since I've come on board as well, we've been working hard to try to secure funds so we can work towards having the creation of a housing production plan. You identify goals, you identify strategies to get to the 10%. None of this is overnight, by the way. It takes time, but you have to start somewhere, correct? So the HPP is the second element. And I will say, what is that incremental progress? If a town goes through a housing production plan, has a series of community, think of it a little bit like the master plan process we went through, and there's a series of workshops and so on, and visioning sessions, and compile this report, it gets submitted then to DHCD, that's to the state authority, Department of Housing and Community Development, and they will certify if the plan is aligned according to the HPP guidelines. And it's not just good enough to have a plan on the shelf, though. We must be making incremental progress on the plan, which would have a series, typically, of recommendations, strategies, whether it be action items, policy items, and so on. Okay. The third option third most common, is to look at the low and moderate income housing that occupies 1.5% of a municipality's land area. I'd like to spend the most of my time with respect to Safe Harbor to discuss the calculation that we went through. So what do we know thus far? We're not at 10%. We're at 7.3% of SHI. We are in the process and have been working on trying to create this housing production plan, which is very, very important. But even with that, frankly, that takes time. It has to be a working document. Once we have that, it's not overnight, right? And these numbers of the SHI go back many, many years too, right? So with respect to the 1.5% calculation, what we've done is taken a look at, in accordance with DHCD guidelines, and this is that GLAM calculation, the general land area minimum. And we are required to calculate the total, to get to that 1.5% number, the total land area in Oxford, 17,550 acres. And there's a series of deductions that you can do from that number, okay? Water bodies, wetlands, state property, federal property. Think of the Army Corps, for example. Political subdivisions, sewer district, so on. And you can deduct that from that 17,550 acres. That gives us to a number of land area of 13,647.62. With that number, we go back and we look at the SHI. And this is going back to the subsidized housing inventory. So the general land area minimum, we're going to look at the total land area in town that we have for affordable housing. And again, as I stated earlier with SHI, that includes the Housing Authority properties and Orchard Hill. SHI acreage comes in at 229.38. That gives us a GLAM score of 1.68, above the 1.5. Now, I want to say something too about the calculations itself. These have to be done in a timely fashion, and these were done at the time when the applicant filed. And so we put this number together. And therefore, the memo that I've shared with you is exactly that, breaking down each of the properties as we are required, and bring it down to each acre. And we can't count everything. We had to exclude wetlands as required by the DHD guidelines. And this is how we derived to that 1.68 number. At this time, if I may, and I do appreciate your attention to this, and my advance apologies if I was a little long here, but it is important to go through each of these elements and really to share with you what we've gone through from our end to derive this. Because to simply say, well, we don't, it doesn't seem like we meet it, would be a disservice. So we felt it was important at least to spend the time to understand what the baseline is, if you will. And so, Mr. Chairman, members, if I may, I'd like to turn over to Attorney Weissheit from KP Law to talk about now what perhaps the next steps may be for your consideration.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Alex Weissheit from KP Law, Town Council. So Tony just did an excellent job of laying out the three potential options for the board to invoke safe harbor. As he stated, based on his calculations, the board at this point does have the option of invoking safe harbor pursuant to the third option, which is that the town exceeds the 1.5% GLAM number. Just to speak about what that would mean if the board were to vote to invoke safe harbor, the hearing would then be suspended, and the board would have 15 days to issue a letter to both DHCD and to the applicant laying out the reasoning for invoking safe harbor. This would include all of Tony's calculations and his methodology for how he arrived at that number. The applicant, upon receipt of the letter, would then have 15 days to appeal to DHCD, and then DHCD would undertake its own analysis and either affirm or overturn the determination. So, you know, in my opinion, from a legal perspective, there really is no downside to invoking safe harbor. If safe harbor is invoked and DHCD agrees and upholds your decision to invoke safe harbor, the applicant can still proceed with their application, but they would not then have the right to appeal to HAC, which is the appeals adjudicatory body of DHCD. So if you were to deny the application at that point, they would not have the right to then appeal to HAC. So, you know, in my opinion, there really is no downside to the board invoking it. If DHCD were to disagree with the calculation, the application would then be, you know, remanded back, and we would essentially be sitting where we are today, right at the start of the public hearing.
That would be after, if we did invoke safe harbor within 15 days, that would be, they'd have 15 days to appeal, and that's the point at which we may be back here if,
Well, it would be, we would be back here after the appellate process before DHCD plays out. That would take a significant amount of time.
Okay,
Chairman, if I
Yeah.
may,
sure.
counsel, if you could just spend a minute, if the board invokes the safe harbor, could you comment on whether that would change the showing that the applicant must make, or the consideration that the board must make in connection with this submission?
So the standard really would be the same for the board's review, although the board would have, well, I'm sorry, let me take that back. The board would not be reviewing the application at that point until DHCD makes its determination about whether or not safe harbor in fact applies. If DHCD agrees that safe harbor is applicable, the applicant would have the option of still continuing with its application, but the board would have more flexibility in terms of the conditions that you may want to put on the approval, or you would have the right to deny the application, and there would not be a right of appeal to HAC.
So the way I understand the 40B process is that the conditions tend to be more of a buy-in, if you will, as opposed to, these are the conditions we're imposing.
I will say that if HAC reviews the conditions or reviews a denial, they are very much mission-driven to approve these sorts of developments. And it's likely that if there are conditions that are seen as, not economically feasible, or, other things that may be seen as, not beneficial to the development, HAC is likely to overturn those.
Whether or not the safe harbor has been claimed.
So HAC would only review a decision on the merits if, I'm sorry, I see your question. There would not be an appeal to HAC if safe harbor is invoked and HAC agrees that it was appropriately invoked, right? Then there would not be an appeal after that to HAC.
So the benefits, if you will, to a developer of a 40B application are not there to the same extent once safe harbor is claimed.
That's fair.
And accepted.
And accepted, I'm sorry.
Accepted,
yes.
right, upheld.
I just want to make sure I understood the nuance. Thank you very much. That was very well explained. Should that be claimed prior to the opening of the public hearing?
Well, technically, the public hearing has been opened, but in my opinion, it should be claimed before the board undertakes any substantive testimony from either the public or the developer.
Right. So it sounds like what we're being asked here is, do we want to invoke safe harbor as a board? We can deliberate on that.
Well, in connection with that deliberation, I would ask whether, council, whether you have reviewed the numbers with town planner, and are you comfortable that the numbers are as they're thought to be?
I am, yes. Of course, I can't speak for DHCD, but I think there's a reasonable basis for his calculations.
Right, so I think what they're showing is this third provision, general land area minimum, that we're currently at 1.6%. And 1.5% is the threshold at which you could invoke safe harbor.
Well, to get the discussion going, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I would move that the safe harbor be claimed based on the 1.68 as laid out by town planner.
Okay,
I second.
okay. Do we want to have any discussion on that? Does anybody have any other questions on that? Al?
Yeah, I would like to know
Speak up,
what
Al.
actually was contained in computations? Because I only see things here.
Al, can you speak up a little bit? I want to make sure everyone in back can hear.
The question is that Al wanted to know what was contained in the calculations.
Because years ago, we had a project in Mascot of 180 houses that were, I thought, all subsidized. They were 24, 38 ranches and similar things. And we also had a project on Ballard Street that's similar. I know those were subsidized, and I think most of Massachusetts were subsidized at that time. Those houses still stay here. They take up a lot of land area, but they're still here. Is there a reason that they're not included? Is time, or is there a time limit?
There might very well have been a time limit to those. Some of the properties on SHIs, and even in ours, for example, the affordability expirations, some are in perpetuity for life. Others are limited to 40 years, 30 years. It depends on the program. I've seen them as short as 15 years. And frankly, it would also matter, again, with respect to the subsidy, where it was derived from. So if it was through HUD, the federal program through HUD, or a state program perhaps, or a program through mass housing. So it would depend. But you may see projects drop off as the affordability expires. And so, for example, on the document here, we have an affordability expiration of 2024 for Orchard Hill, and the others through the Housing Authority are in perpetuity. That was based on certain programs at the time that they received to do those projects. So, and years ago, there used to be a housing rehab program too here in town, and I believe it was in the 70s or the 80s. And I remember going through those out of curiosity, and unfortunately, those are long gone. So, thank you. Appreciate the question. The houses are still there, thankfully.
So,
I've been there walking in on small lots, and they still remain.
Yeah.
Income from the projects is much different than the housing that is built today.
Well, thank you.
I'm sorry, did I hear you say that the Orchard Hill exemption expires 2024?
That's correct. In the SHI, recently and we pulled this on September 20th, 2021, that there's an affordability expiration of 2024. And we are, from the town side, we are working, and we do look at our SHI, and we are working on trying to get those renewed. It's critically important to get those renewed, because otherwise, we want to make progress. We want to get to the 10%, and that would be a tremendous loss if we lost those units.
Yeah. With the calculation of 7.3%, how many additional units would put us at 10%?
Oh, so that's going to depend, sir. With respect to on the SHI, we're in an interesting time. So the year-round housing units are currently 5,520, and that's based on the 2010 census. Now, when will DHCD revise those numbers? I hope soon. Each year, they will submit the SHI list to each city and town. And typically, it is in December. And so I don't know, with respect to the Census 2020, depending on the numbers that they pull, where we would fall. What I can say is that what we have a working knowledge of is typically number of new units per year being built in the community. And do know that the 10% is a moving target. So to get to the 5,520, that was from 2010. We'd anticipate that number would be higher, and therefore that 7.3% would actually be a little lower.
Got it. Okay. So that's going to change. All right. Any other questions amongst the board? No. So we have a motion and a second. So we can only have 5 voting members, so Dan, you're an alternate tonight. So I guess I'd call for the vote, starting with Tom. It was a motion, okay,
Motion,
to invoke safe harbor.
invoke safe harbor.
A yes is to go along with that, yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so the vote is 5-0. Could you please explain briefly again what the next steps would be, just so everyone's aware of it?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. At this point, the hearing is suspended. On behalf of the board, we will be issuing a letter to the applicant and DHCD describing the action taken by the board this evening and including all of the calculations that have been done by the town planner. And then the applicant will have their right of appeal to DHCD, and that process will play out.
Okay.
Excuse me, what happened, yes?
So, if you couldn't hear in the back, there's a provision called safe harbor, that the town voted to invoke safe harbor, which means that we believe we've exceeded one of the minimum requirements to say that we have a good general land area of subsidized housing as it sits. And so we,
All can agree on here.
okay, so,
Everybody here is, wanting to know what's going on up here. Very difficult.
yeah, sorry about that. The microphones weren't working here tonight, but, so there's a fifth, so we've invoked that. There's gonna be a letter within 15 days that goes to the state agency. The applicant can appeal that, and then that state agency would render a decision whether they agree with our safe harbor invoking or whether they disagree, and then we would be back to this.
No, everybody's here, sitting here waiting, and it's very difficult to hear and understand what's going on.
Okay, well, that's as plain as I can state it right now. Okay, thank you. All right, so, we may have other business to talk about tonight, but that concludes this hearing on 722 Main Street for tonight.
Someone
No.
from the public had.
No,
We
We
really
can't- we
take any
can't.
questions
No.
about this. It's
No.
not before the board.
yes.
Well, no, right now it's not.
No, I don't know. Sorry, Attorney Whiteside, are we supposed to close this hearing? No, suspended. Thank you. Did I call you town manager? Sorry about that, I know. Right after I said it, I went,
It's all right.
You're doing great.
I'm gonna give them a couple minutes to clear, and then we're gonna finish up our other business, yes.
Don't know if they're gonna clear, and this is part of the meeting, so it's part of the audio.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah.
You don't need a
Oh, okay. Okay, 5-minute recess. Okay. Ready for us to start, or? Okay. All right, we're good. Is there any other business anybody would like to bring up tonight? No? Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? And the votes?
Sorry, who seconded? I did.
I did. Oh, he said aye. Stephen?
And then I voted. Aye.
Aye.
Yes. Meeting's adjourned.
Hey, you got the hit the gavel.
There you go.
Thank you.
Need a gavel.
Wow, I feel like a judge.
May the Red Sox
Oh, that's
take this
tonight?
first game.